18 months ago, you were $40 overdrawn and skipping meals to make rent. This morning, you sold a creature that does not exist to your own government for $600 million. And that wasn't even your biggest sale this week. This is what happened when the solo leveling system, the blue screen, the dungeons, the monsters, all of it, stopped being a story on your phone and picked the most broke person it could find. You. And by the time it was over, you had every dollar you ever wanted. And the world was burning because of it. You have to understand how broke you really were, not skip the coffee broke. Which bill can I not pay and still survive broke? 20 years old, buried in debt that wasn't even your fault, working a job that took everything and handed almost nothing back. You had stopped dreaming about being rich a long time ago. You were just trying not to drown. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday, your alarm went off, and a pane of blue light was hanging in the air above your bed. Text on it, calm and clean, like a menu from a game. You have been selected as a player. Underneath it, your name. Row of stats. Strength, agility, sense, all sitting at some flat, embarrassing number. 5 glowing points, waiting to be spent. You waved your hand straight through it, pressed the heels of your hands into your eyes and looked again, and it was still there. You told yourself you'd finally crack from the stress, because things like this don't happen. Not in the real world, and definitely not to someone like you. But the screen wouldn't leave, followed your eyes across the room, so after an hour of trying to blink it out of existence, you did the only thing you could think of. You dunked all 5 points into strength, and you went to the gym to prove it was nonsense. The bar that had been beating you for a year went up like it was empty. You added plates. It went up again. You kept stacking until the metal bent across your shoulders and the whole room went quiet and stared. You, the kid who couldn't do 10 push-ups yesterday, suddenly the strongest person in the building. It was real. The video game had reached out of your phone and rewritten your body on command, and then you walked home and reality set back in. Because here's what nobody tells you about waking up with superpowers when you are broke. Being strong doesn't pay rent. You could bend a barbell in half, and you still couldn't cover the electric bill. Muscles aren't money. So while anyone else would have been dreaming about capes and headlines, you had exactly one cold question running through your head. How do you turn this into cash? So you started grinding. And this is the part the fantasy never shows you. It was slow. Brutally slow. The system handed you daily quests, with a penalty if you skipped even one, and each finished quest paid out a thin trickle of experience. Level 2 took a week. Level 3 took nearly a month. You were getting stronger by inches, not miracles. No montage, no overnight god. Half a year in, you were maybe the fittest person in your city, and still just as broke as the day you started. Almost gave up on it being anything more than a strange curse. And then, at level 10, a new button appeared in the corner of your vision. Enter gate. You pressed it standing in the middle of your own bedroom, and a door of blue light tore open in the air in front of you. The other side was not your apartment. It was a dungeon. Stone walls, torchlight, cold air pouring out of it, and something down there breathing in the dark. It was the exact kind of door you had only ever seen inside a screen. And where anyone else would have walked in, dreaming of being a hero, you walked in with one thought, and one thought only. What is down here that somebody up there would pay for? The answer, it turned out, was everything. First creature you put down burst into blue light and left a weapon lying on the stone, a blade colder than any metal on earth, that never chipped, never rusted, never dulled. The walls had ore running through them that didn't match anything on the periodic table. There were stones that glowed with their own light, plants that closed a wound while you watched, bones lighter and stronger than titanium. You filled a bag until you could barely lift it, and you carried it back out through the door of light and into your bedroom, and none of it vanished. It stayed. It was real. So you took the single smallest thing you had, one glowing stone, to a private buyer who dealt in rare materials, and you watched his hands start to shake as his machines failed to identify it, because nothing on earth was supposed to read like that. He offered you more for that one rock than you had earned in your entire life. Standing there, holding a number with that many zeros, you finally understood what you were actually sitting on. Not a game. The only mine on the whole planet for things the world had never even imagined, and had exactly one owner. But the loot was nothing compared to what you tried next. Because one day, standing over a creature you had just cornered in the dark, you had a thought that changed everything. What if you didn't kill it? What if you brought it out alive? It fought you the whole way, snapping, shrieking, stronger than anything that should be able to exist, and your heart was slamming against your ribs as you dragged it inch by inch toward the door of light. You had no idea if a living thing could even survive the crossing. It did. 1 second it was thrashing on cold stone in another world. The next it was pinned to the floor of your cramped little bedroom. Real. Breathing. Impossible. The monster from behind that door, in the same room where you couldn't cover rent a year ago. And as you stood there shaking, holding down something no human being had ever laid hands on, you weren't thinking about how dangerous it was, or where it came from, or what it meant. You were thinking about exactly how much someone would pay to own it, because a living one was worth 100 times everything else you'd ever pulled out of there. Something no scientist, no army, no zoo on Earth had ever gotten their hands on. And the first time the right people caught wind of what you could bring through that door, they didn't send police. They sent a delegation. Quiet men in good suits who could authorize numbers with more zeros than you could say out loud. They wanted the creatures to study, to breed, to understand. One beast, $600 million, wired before they had even loaded it into the truck. Then $1 billion for the next. Then governments started bidding against each other because whoever controlled what came out of your door controlled the future. Of medicine, of energy, of everything. The broke kid who couldn't make rent had become the single most valuable supplier alive. Money stopped being a number you counted and started being a number you couldn't spend fast enough. For a while, that felt exactly like winning. But you never once asked what they actually wanted it all for. Because the governments buying your creatures weren't building zoos. They were building armies. The materials you sold went into weapons. Armor nothing on Earth could pierce. Blades that went through tanks like paper. Tools that could flatten a city block and still fit inside a backpack. The living monsters you handed over turned up on battlefields on the other side of the planet. And you told yourself it wasn't your problem. You were just the supplier. You just opened the door and sold whatever fell out. But every nation that couldn't buy from you was terrified of the ones that could. And terror is exactly how an arms race begins. One country's monster had to be answered by another country's bigger one. One impossible weapon demanded a more impossible weapon back. All of it, every last piece, traced back through 100 quiet hands to a single door of blue light in a cheap bedroom that only one person on Earth could open. You had told yourself the whole time that you were just making money. What you were really doing was handing the most dangerous people alive a brand new way to kill each other, over and over and over again. And then the world you had been selling off in pieces finally broke. It didn't happen all at once. It happened one deal at a time. Your deals. The wars stopped looking like wars and started looking like something the planet might not walk away from, fought with things that were never supposed to leave that door. Cities you had never even visited went dark. Somewhere in a very safe, very expensive room, surrounded by all the money you had ever dreamed of, you finally did the math on what it had actually cost. You got exactly what you asked for. The morning that screen picked you. You were broke, and now you would never be broke again, not in 100 lifetimes. But every single miracle you dragged out of that door to sell, someone else turned into a way to end lives. Everyone else on Earth trades their hours for money that never quite adds up. You traded the world for yours. That is the part the blue screen never warned you about. It didn't ask if you were strong enough, or smart enough, or good enough. It just found the most desperate person it could, and opened a door, and trusted you to be greedy. So be honest with yourself. If you were broke, and starving, and a door of light open that could hand you everything, would you really have stopped to ask where it all ended up? Or would you have kept selling too, right up until the day the sky went dark?